All right. Hey, you guys. This is Dr. Beluja, and we have Miss ADHD Brain that's here. And Miss ADHD Brain is here to talk to us about what happens with patients with ADHD and relationships. So we're just talking to Miss ADHD Brain, and she's the brain of somebody with ADHD. So can you tell us what happens? What happens in relationships?
Hey, Doc. So I would say we don't really have any problems getting into a relationship. It's mainly sustaining that relationship. That's what we struggle with.
Okay, it's mainly just sustaining the actual relationship that takes place.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? So constantly, and is that with everything that the brain does, or is that just a certain? What is that? Is that just everything that the brain does, or is it just relationships that need to switch?
I don't know.
Okay, that's a fair answer. So you don't know. Okay, got it. So I found a video that I thought was really interesting to watch of somebody
Mm-hmm.
with ADHD, and it's an old video back in the 1950s. So it's close to 70 years old, and
Mm.
it's right here. It's about this girl, and if you just take a look, can you see my screen?
You're a creature of habit, Barbara. We
I
all
can.
are. Unfortunately, not all
I
of your
cannot see
habits
your
are
screen.
good ones.
Can't see it.
This was how
Okay.
your day started. Started wrong.
Let me hold on one second. Let me go to Chrome, window, habit patterns.
Your neighbor, Helen, is a creature
So
of
this
habit.
is this is
This was how your
this
day
this
started.
video is wrong on a lot of levels, but this is basically interesting. So what happens is this lady has relationships. This is how this person's at a party.
To the museum. They have a wonderful costume exhibit there. I got an idea for a new dress.
Oh, what kind? You've never taken an interest in music or politics or art.
We always go to the beach. Every year we take a cottage at Estes.
You've only been once.
There's wonderful swimming and lots of boys.
So it's interesting. It's interesting. So this is the Miss ADHD Brain that's actually out there, and she's in a group setting, and she's sort of making up different things in social settings and whatnot because of the disorganization that's there. But what happens is that in the 1950s they depict this brain as somebody that's made a choice, which is really wonderful because of their empowering nature that actually takes place there, where she's compared against this girl who has all these things. So my question is that what is it about these new relationships? What is it that allows you to be happy with the new relationships, and how long does that last?
To be honest, it doesn't last that long. Because, like I said, it's not getting into relationships with people, it's sustaining that relationship. It's,
Hmm.
I think I would put it, to be honest, I, I get bored.
Hmm. Right. And so if the brain gets bored, what happens? And so this is ultimately, it comes down to a very fundamental tenet where, they, on a superficial level, these are habit patterns. On a deeper level, this is a uh, a dopamine receptor issue on a deeper
Mm.
level. And on the deepest level, it's also a spiritual issue, which is can be really helped by meditation. So there's three layers to this, and science really only has uncovered the first level and the second level, which is the cognitive behavioral level, which is the habit patterns, which you can superficially work with, which also can manipulate the dopamine receptor issue, which is a genetic issue, which there's not enough dopamine receptors in the brain. And then hence, when something seems to get old, there's not creative ways to foster relationships over a long-term period of time.
Hmm.
Um, if you take a look at some papers that are looking at women, especially women with childhood, there's like basically a lot of issues that do take place with seeking of new relationships and getting into dangerous activities for girls that are younger. And then in addition to that, there's a lot of they say that it's a major, this ADHD, especially adolescent ADHD and then adult ADHD, has a lot of aggressive behavior, and it's a major public health problem. It's a very costly public health problem, listed in this paper by Gondelman, by Maya Gondelman, who's published this in Journal of Abnormal Psychology. If you take a look at other papers that talk to mindfulness meditation and ADHD in adulthood and empiric support, treatment overview, and the future generations by Mitchell, published in Cognitive Behavioral Practice, this journal, you see that basically these thought processes really hit at the core, but these meditative thought processes aren't really brought out in people. So there's a concept that mindfulness actually does not even touch on, which is the mode of goodness, which is where mindfulness comes out of. And the mode of goodness, is described later on in some chapters, and we'll go, I think it's in chapter 13 here. And it's an interesting thought process of this yoga book that we have, which is the Gita, which talks about yoga and all the different kinds of yoga. And it's really an interesting thought process that I want to bring up. And it talks about it talks about divine and demoniac natures, which is different. And this is a little, so it's a little bit, it's interesting because it talks about what are the nature of somebody who's in the mode of goodness, what is the nature of somebody who's in the mode of passion, and what is the nature of somebody who is in the mode of, what is the nature of somebody who's in the mode of ignorance. And if you look at this girl right here, she is living in the mode of ignorance, even though her family lives in the mode, like upstairs, she's in the mode of ignorance. And this is her habit pattern that's actually created. But this video is very superficial because it talks to nothing at the root level. So this person will go through their existence until they're forced to change doing this. And this level of existence can come from any mode of spirituality, whether it's from any mode of spirituality, whether it's from the East or whether it's from the West. It doesn't matter because there's venues inside. But if you take a look at just her room itself, is this that takes place when you look at the room. You see, she's got a disheveled room, and then at the end of this, she's got this, right? So if you have this at the room, but where this comes from, if you take a look at monks will tell you immediately about this. And the ADHD brain is disorganized. If the ADHD brain is disorganized, what happens is the actual surroundings become disorganized. But it's not just there. There's root cause of this, monks will tell you, is at the level of the heart. And in the heart, there's a disorganization that's there. And if that disorganization and that impurity is actually in the heart, that will then go to the brain, and thereafter the brain will act on it. And that's what the issue is that what happens is that Western science will tell you that, look, you can change this with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is number one. Excellent. You change this with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is this video. They're saying cognitive behavioral therapy will ask you to look at pain versus pleasure. And that's excellent. Then you'll have medication, and medication will tell you for ADHD to work on dopamine versus on times versus off times, and wearing off times. That's excellent because that helps you on a short-term plan and a stopgap. But this is the roadmap that can immediately help you. Say you don't have your medications, is simply meditating on the heart and asking for a mode of goodness. Now, it's interesting because they talk about the difference in this video between the mode of ignorance, where she's sleeping and she's not ready for her day, and the mode of goodness, which is her next door neighbor, which her next door neighbor has worked on, and she's working on creating this book, reading this book, and she has greater freedom to do the extra things that she wants to do in a more organized fashion. And so, but the issue is interesting. It's interesting because this is where she
Days without conscious thought. If you try, really try, you can root out the poor.
So this is, if you try, really try, you can rule out. But this is something that I disagree with, because there has to be a will. And once the will changes, that will actually direct the whole life. And so it's not a very difficult meditative exercise to do, to ask for a cleaning of the heart. Once the heart is clean, or that relationship is clean, automatically this grows. And you can see this. You can see this as in mothers. You can see this in mothers, that this incredible change takes place in mothers and transformation in moms. Where mothers beforehand are sort of unorganized, but once they have this sort of divine sort of thought process of actually taking care of their child, all of a sudden these mode of goodness qualities are bestowed upon them, because they are taking care of a child, which is a divine activity, and that's a divine service that actually takes place. So it's a very interesting thing that actually, or you know, somebody that's actually taking care of a spouse, that, and they look at their spouse not as an object of pleasure, but an object of service to their supreme. And that becomes a yogic activity. So that subtle thought process, boom, changes a responsibility, saying, I have responsibility for this person. This is what I need to do.
How
And
do
this
you
is where the
develop that
disorganized
will?
organize. So that will actually can take place by simply asking for that will. When in a deep meditative state, whether in whatever faith that you have, we have a book called Meditate or Die. And what it says is that if you're not in a meditative state, it's more likely that you're in a state of wreck. Now, there are people that have completely clean places and whatnot, but their lives are complete messes. Like if you take it, Al Capone, all these people, you know, they may have had completely clean places because of their servants or whatever, but their habits and their lives are completely out of place. There are those people, but those are outliers. In general, you will find that those people that have, you know, clean, tidy places, clean, tidy desks, clean, tidy, you know, thought process have end up having pretty clean and tidy lives. Right. And so that's where relationship comes from. And so it's not just the relationship with people that bores you, it's the relationship with you and objects that also bore you, Miss ADHD brain. So that's basically it. So, and can the brain be changed? I believe 100% yes. And I think that this happens, and especially if you study monks very well, you'll see monks having one behavior before they enter this, and they'll have another behavior afterwards. That has to do with brain waves, absolutely, because who you associate with will end up shaping where you're going. That's number one. But number two, it also has to do with the inner desire to cleanse one's heart at a meditative level. And once that click is made, it turns into from I don't want to I want to. Like the difference between her here and dropping the clothes on the floor, accidental habits is not true, because there's nothing accidental about it. There's just a will. Either you want to do it or you don't want to do it. And if you want to do it, it most likely will release dopamine. If you don't want to do it, it most likely won't release dopamine. But how do you change that I don't want to do for ADHD into something that I do want to do? And it happens at a very deep level. And it starts to blossom in every place in your life. Like example, I want to clean my clothes versus I don't want to clean my clothes, right? I want to wash my clothes. Like they have one thought process here, you know, stating this, and I appreciate you taking the time to say that this is Miss ADHD brain. But if you take a look, she's saying Helen has trained herself to do this. But this video is assuming that both people have the same brain, and it's just not true.
Your neighbor, Helen, is a creature of habit too. But she got up when the alarm went off. Because, Barbara, that's...
Both people have different genetic predispositions.
Life to prepare for it. Of course, you've gotten into the habit of not being prepared. And now it's
like right here. She has the stain on her shirt. She doesn't want to clean her clothes. She doesn't want to take the time because she doesn't want to do it, because she doesn't value those activities, because those activities don't release the dopamine in her brain. right? But the moment you want to do it, and that want to do it comes from a deep rooted spiritual thing also. So I don't think that there's just three parts of treating ADHD. I think there's four. One is cognitive behavioral therapy. Second is the actual medication. Third is the physical exercise. And fourth is the actual spiritual practice of meditation that allows you to go deep within and inculcate those abilities. And this is where modern science will disagree, but I think ancient science will say no. These are actually these can these can be inculcated, and I think it's actually casteism. An example is that in the British rule, there was this casting sort of mentality where you said that one person from one caste can't go to another caste or can't elevate. And it's actually a deep racism that drives this thought process. And it's difficult because what happens is it says that one person cannot improve their life standing and their ability, skills, and their skill set because they are simply meant to do this. And that's completely wrong, because in the Gita it says that you can go on, and if a Brahmin is judged by their actions and not by their actual by where they're born. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts?
So I understand now. I have no problems. It's okay for me to be like this, but I can change myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And the will to change is the first thing, but it's if you want to change, right? And so that is at a deep rooted level. And this can happen in a deep meditative state. And how long does it take to get into that deep meditative state? Well, it's usually if you meditate for about 5 minutes and you really deeply say, okay, I want to change this thing in my heart, I want to change. Like an example is I don't want to do this. And you'll find when you come to that level where there's a frustration in the heart, you look at, in your meditation, you look at that frustration. Like if you're saying go, run, go, it doesn't matter. Allah, 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 Jesus, 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 whatever it is. And you're praying and you're in a deep meditative state and you do this, what happens is that you can change that level right at the heart, and then your actions will change throughout the day. But this is not something that's very well taught. And it's known throughout monks, probably throughout the world, that practice this in Nepal and in India and in America. St. Francis absolutely knew this, that the changes to actually take place at the level of the heart. All right, so this has been ADHD, and we've talked about ADHD in the setting of relationships and how these can change. Other videos will refer to, I think the actual truth is that you can change what you want, and you can change your personality type to tweak it to what you would like and what you don't want. All right. Thank you for being on. I appreciate it, Miss ADHD Brain.
Thank you.